I said we were going to look into some of the highlights in the life of Jesus before we dug back into another book. So if you have your Bibles with you this morning, turn to the second chapter of the Gospel of John, where we're going to take a look at the very first miracle that Jesus ever performed. We'll do that in just a moment, but as always, before we talk about the Son, let's bow our heads and hearts and let's talk to His Father first. Father, we come before you thankful that you are a prayer-answering God. We've seen that in our congregation here lately. We thank you that you're listening, and sometimes your timing is not always our timing, but when it is and when it works that way, it's wonderful. I thank you for the love and the care and the concern for your family. I thank you for the prayers that have been answered, the improvements that have been made, and I thank you for the fears that have been taken away. Sometimes in the midst of our pressing on in prayer, we get to the point where we doubt, and then when we read miracles like this morning, we think to ourselves, with your track record of faithfulness in our lives, why should we have ever doubted? We praise you for your faithfulness. Father, as we open your word, we ask you to come in a powerful way. We pray for the one who teaches that you would forgive him his sins, for they are many. We come to this place this morning to see Jesus of Nazareth and him only. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen. Jesus changes water into wine in Cana of Galilee at a wedding feast there. First 11 verses of chapter 2. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My time has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out their choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." This, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed in Cana of Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. Now, just a moment, we're going to ask some questions about Jesus attending a party, and then we're going to answer those questions. But before we do that, there are 2 sore thumbs that stick out of this text that we need to take a look at on the front end. Sore thumb number 1, I want you to please note that strong love can cause serious mistakes. Look at verses 3 and 4. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." Now, I can understand Mary's request and motivation here, because I had a mother just like her. Mary knows that Jesus is a perfect son, literally, an obedient son, and so she uses that here to get what she wants. When the host runs out of wine, Mary says, "Don't worry, my son over there will take care of it." And then she goes to Jesus and she says, "Jesus, they're out of wine, so, do your thing." And he says, "Oh, Mom," that's the original Greek, "Oh, Mom, my time has not yet come." And then Mary points her finger at Jesus, as only mothers can do, and she says, "Young man, you were the one who wrote the commandment, honor your father and mother, so practice what you preach, now do your thing." Before we go any further, let's stop and see what's really going on here. Let me read verse 5 to you. Read it with me. His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there's something that just jumps off the page here in verse 5 that I don't want you to miss. If you were a woman back in the first century, you wouldn't be ordering anybody around except maybe your kids. Unfortunately, in the first century, women were to be seen and not heard until Jesus changed that with the teaching of the New Testament. But as you can see in verse 5, Mary, Jesus' mother, is in someone else's home ordering somebody else's servants around. That means that Mary had been put in a position of authority and responsibility at this wedding. Maybe she was in charge of the food and the drinks. And that suggests that she might have been related to the bride or groom that was getting married. You know how that works at a wedding. Aunts and sisters and cousins show up to help with different things at the wedding. Legend and tradition, through historical and cultural writings of the first century, even suggest that this was the beloved Apostle John's wedding himself, and that his mother Salome and Jesus' mother Mary might have been sisters. So Mary was there helping family at the wedding, and she had been put in charge of at least the wine. Now this legend and tradition is pure speculation because it's not information that's included in Scripture. But it fits if you think about it. 1, Mary is family helping at the wedding. 2, she's given authority because she's a woman ordering servants around. 3, John is the only gospel writer that records this particular miracle, Jesus' first miracle. Maybe it's because it was his wedding. And 4th, this would help explain the close, intimate relationship between Jesus and John. Jesus entrusting his mother to John when he's dying on the cross. We don't know. But those are some of the logistics that set up this miracle. Now let's get back to the thrust of the sore thumb. Strong love can sometimes cause serious mistakes. Mary said to Jesus, "They have no more wine." And then Jesus says, "Dear woman, why do you involve me? My time has not yet come." Do you see what Mary's doing? She's trying to kickstart Jesus' ministry, which any good mother would do. She's saying, "Jesus, this is it. You can stand up and you can say, I'm the Messiah. I'm the anointed one of God. I'm the Christ. I am the King of Kings who's been sent to save you. Jesus, this is it. Look at the crowd. They'll all begin following you, and you can finally tell them that you're the Son of God." Now, Jesus didn't do that. He changed the water into wine, and we'll talk more about that later, but he didn't go to the length to which his mother expected him to go. And she only did it because she loved him. She only did it because of what the angel had told her. She only did it because she knew that God was her son's father. She was just trying to push him into what she already knew to be true. Brothers and sisters, we need to be careful of listening too closely to the people who love us, because sometimes love blinds. In Mark 8:32, do you remember that Jesus has just announced to his disciples he's going up to Jerusalem, he's going to hang on a cross, he's going to die, be crucified, and then Peter rebukes Jesus. Can you imagine that? Peter rebukes Jesus. It's at that point where Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Why did Peter do that? He did it because he loved Jesus, and he was dead wrong. He loved Jesus, but he was dead wrong. Listen, and this is important. Please notice that Mary was saying exactly the same thing that Satan said in Matthew 4 in the temptation of Jesus. Remember Satan? Satan said to Jesus, "Go up to the highest point of the temple and jump off, and then when you're not hurt, crowds will gather and they'll follow you. Do a miracle. Get a crowd, and everyone will know who you are, and everyone will follow you." Mary's saying exactly the same thing. She was saying it out of love. The devil was saying it out of hatred, but they were both saying the same thing. I'm glad my wife thinks I'm wonderful. But you see, I got to be careful because I know how much she loves me. One time in high school, I was challenged to a fight by an upperclassman who was twice my size. And all of my friends who loved me came up to me and said, "Bill, you can take him. You're so good. He doesn't have a prayer. You can take him." And I believed them. And I got beat like a drum. If you have lots of people that love you and care for you, thank God for that. It's a beautiful gift. It's rare. But if you do have that, learn to cling very closely to Christ. Because you see, He mingles wisdom and love perfectly. All right, so thumb number 2, I want you to please note the principle of God's timing. Verse 4, "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." What Jesus is saying here is, Mom, I love you, but you don't understand what is going on here. I'm in submission to my Father, and the time is not yet right. Notice what Jesus says, my time has not yet come. My time has not yet come. The Gospel of John records that phrase 4 different times, and a bunch of other different times in Matthew and Mark we see that phrase. At different events and turning points in Jesus' ministry, people will try and force His hand and speed up His appointment with the cross. But Jesus will say, my time has not yet come. And then in the 17th chapter of John, the high and holy prayer, where Jesus is praying for His disciples and praying for us, He finally says, my hour has come. He was perfectly in tune with the will and the timing of His Father. Isn't timing everything? And if you said no, did you ever try and hit a curveball? Isn't timing everything? If you said no, you ever try and change lanes in heavy traffic? Ever try and hit a moving target? Or figure out the right time to say, I love you to someone that you really care about? Timing is everything. But we don't want to wait, do we? We want it now, or we want it yesterday. We're an instant society. We have microwave ovens and instant potatoes and minute rice and fast food restaurants. How many of you have gotten out of a drive-through line through a fast food restaurant because it wasn't fast enough? Did you know that it was 80 years of preparation from the time that God called Moses until He used him to deliver the Israelites? 80 years. Did you know that it was 120 years from the time that God told Noah to build an ark until the first raindrop fell in the desert? 120 years. Did you know that it was 17 years from the time that David was anointed as king until he served that first day on the throne of Israel? Did you know that 13 years of Joseph's life were spent going from the pit to the palace? Paul says in Galatians 6:9, do not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. For at the proper time, if we do not give up. Don't give up. Don't you dare, because your miracle may just be around the corner. People come to me and say, how can I know God's will? When's He going to let me know? When's He going to bring the right girl along or the right guy in my life? When's the temptation that I'm facing right now going to stop? Or when am I going to get over this depression? And I can say to you, upon the authority of God's word, when God's time is right, God's thing will happen. And you can trust Him in the meantime. When God's time is right, God's thing will happen, and you can trust Him in the meantime. I told you about the man in my church who came to me one time in my office one day, and he said, preacher, you got to call her off. You got to call my wife off. She's driving me crazy. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, she wants me to become a Christian so bad, and I'm not ready. He said, every time I turn the radio on, even in my truck, it's tuned to a Christian radio station. Every time I turn the TV on, it's turned to a religious channel. Every time I pick up a paper to read it, a religious book falls out. Every time I go to the John and grab the toilet paper, a religious tract falls on the floor. And if you don't call her off, I'm never going to be a Christian. You see, she was motivated by love, but her timing wasn't right. She wanted to help him with the process, but she was turning him off and producing the wrong results. I had a talk with his wife, who was a great Christian lady. I told her to back off and trust God's timing and not her timing. Her husband became a Christian 2 years later, and I baptized him. Can you imagine what the world would be like today if Abraham and Sarah hadn't tried to speed things up and help God out by bringing Hagar and Ishmael into the situation? Jesus said, my time has not yet come. And maybe yours hasn't either yet. All right, with those appetizers out of the way, on to the main course for this morning. It's important to note the importance that the Bible attaches to the miracles of Jesus. But John doesn't call them miracles. He calls them signs. Why does John call them signs? He calls them signs because they point to something. And what they point to is the authenticity of Christ, the deity of Jesus of Nazareth. And after each sign or miracle, there's teaching. And that teaching gives us a deeper significance of what God has done. This morning, we're going to look at Jesus' joyful participation in the lives of people while they're laughing. And this is an aspect of Jesus' ministry that's often overlooked. One of the most unfortunate stereotypes that Christians have given to Jesus is that he never had any fun, that he only suffered, and he doesn't want any of his followers to have fun either. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a lie from the pit of hell. Jesus promised us three things. He promised us joy, he promised us trouble, and he promised us eternal life. But notice that joy did make the list. The Christian perspective of Jesus, universal, is that he follows around behind us, and when we look like we're about to have fun, he steps in and he says, you can't do that. Folks, that's a lie. It's not Jesus. I even have had Christians say, well, I'm trying to determine God's will in my life, and I know it won't be fun. I know it'll be miserable. So God, whenever you want me to start suffering, just let me know. And I want to say, Eeyore, shut up. I mean, most Christians approach serving God with all of the enthusiasm with which one greets pneumonia. Let me tell you something. The God of the universe loves to hear his children laugh. Let me say it again. The God of the universe loves to hear the laughter of his children. Is it going to happen every single day, guaranteed? No. Are you never going to have to go through a storm or a trial in your life? No. But the God of the universe loves to hear the laughter of his children. And imagine our surprise this morning when we see that serious, sour Jesus attended a party. Not only that, but he was the life of the party. So without further delay, I want to ask and answer 4 questions about this first miracle of Jesus. Let's take a look. Question number 1, where was Jesus? And the answer, Jesus was at a party. Verses 1 and 2, on the third day, a wedding took place in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had been invited to the wedding. Let me tell you, a first century Jewish wedding was the most joyous of occasions. It was a wonderful time of party and celebration. And it didn't last for an hour or two after the ceremony. It lasted for an entire week. We were in Galilee one time on a Holy Land trip. We were on the bus going to the Jordan River. All of a sudden, the bus driver stopped, and I looked at the bus driver, and I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Nothing's wrong. We just have to wait for a wedding party." He said, "Tell your people to look out the window." And we all looked out the window, and there were about 150 people dressed to the T. And they were going across this cross street, right down the middle of the street, in a procession right in front of the bus. In the middle of the procession was the bride and groom. And there were 4 people holding up this beautiful canopy above the bride and groom as they danced down the street, and they were having a great time. You know, I know Christians who would have walked up to Jesus while he was at a wedding feast and said, "Jesus, you shouldn't be here. The whole world is lost and dying, and you're here at a party. Shame on you, Jesus. People need to be healed. The dead need to be raised. There are broken hearts out there, and you're having fun." What's that? Is that a smile on your face? Jesus, you're out of line here. You should be tending to the things of God. You say, "Well, I don't think anybody would say something like that about Jesus." Really? How about Matthew 11, 18 and 19? Jesus speaking, "For John the Baptist came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say he is a glutton and a drunkard." I can't tell you the number of times I've been wiped out by some well-meaning Christian because I'm doing something about which they don't approve. I remember at the first church where we served, I had about an acre of land to mow with a hand mower. This one summer day, it was so hot. I was about halfway through, and I was dripping wet with sweat. My shirt, you could take and wring it out. And so I took my shirt off, and I finished up. Folks, you'd have thought that I was the Antichrist. I was the talk of the gossip mill of the church for 2 weeks for taking my shirt off while mowing the grass. I've been criticized and bashed for using humor in sermons and telling jokes from time to time. Had a man send me a letter one time. He said, "I can't believe you call yourself a man of God and a minister, and then you tell jokes and you approve of laughter and clapping in a church service." I've been criticized for being too passionate, of a Colts fan and talking about it during the season. I've been criticized that we do clap at services, song services, special music, baptisms. We cheer. Let me tell you something. If you can't picture Jesus having fun, then you don't have a true picture of Jesus. If you'd rather have lemon juice in your communion cup, you're going to have to go get it someplace else. Hermes called the Holy Spirit the happy spirit, and he called the early Christians the children of joy, because we're the only people in this world who have a reason to laugh, because we've got the hope. It's the laughter of the redeemed, because we have the hope. Some people are so uptight about the institution of the church that they would kick Jesus out for getting blood on their carpet. Don't be that way. Jesus said, "I've come that you might have life, that you might have joy, and that you might have it abundantly." All right, question number 2. What was Jesus doing? And the answer was, he was helping out a friend. Verse 9. "And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from." Understand that hospitality was and is an important aspect in Jewish culture. And it would have brought embarrassment, shame, and humiliation, not only on the host family, but especially on the bride and groom if they'd run out of wine. And so Jesus was helping out a friend. He cared enough about this family that he didn't want them to be embarrassed. It was time to save a humble Galilean family from hurt and shame. So Jesus used his miraculous powers for the very first time. Now, we always picture Jesus helping out the brokenhearted, don't we? The lonely and the fearful, and he does. And we always picture Jesus healing the sick and raising the dead. But how often do you see him making a good party better? That's what he was doing here. I remember one year at Praise Gathering, it was a convention they had every year in Indianapolis that the Gaithers put on. We went for years and years in a row. It was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I remember on Friday, that night for supper, I had invited some friends and family to a restaurant, my favorite restaurant, My Treat. It was during our first ministry in Tennessee, and money was very, very scarce. And that night, some people that I had invited brought some people with them that I hadn't invited. And at the end of the meal, the waiter came and brought me the bill, and when I looked at the amount, I thought I was going to die. I looked in my wallet. I had just enough to cover the meal, but that meant I didn't have any money for the next day or any money for the trip home to Tennessee. Love was sitting on one side of me. My mom was sitting on the other side. I leaned over to Love, and I said, "Did you bring any money with you?" And she looked at me and she said, "Not much." And about that time, I felt my mom reach over under the table and hold my hand. I looked at my mom and smiled, and then I realized that she was putting something in my hand. And when I looked down, there was a $100 bill in my hand. And she said, "I got this one. I got this one." She had picked up on our problem, and she didn't want me to be embarrassed in front of family and friends. And that's exactly what Jesus is doing here at his first miracle. Jesus didn't have to say, "I got this one," because with his miraculous power, he took care of the problem without the host even knowing. You see, Jesus cares about what you care about. He not only cares about your salvation and forgiveness and your health and your well-being, but he cares about parking spaces and test scores and little leaguers getting a good hit, good hair days. He cares about whether a family's embarrassed by running out of wine. Jesus made a good party better. Question number 3. How did he do it? And the answer is humorously. And I love this. Verses 7 and 8. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." Now, I had to read this a number of times before I saw the methodology of Jesus and how he was working. But I want you to see it. I don't want you to miss it. John 1 through 3 says that Jesus was in the very beginning. He was there at creation. He made the water. He made the wine, because he made everything, including you and I. So if Jesus had wanted to, if he'd wanted to change the water into wine, all he had to do was one of those little I dream of Genie blink and nod, and the wine would have just automatically appeared in the jars. He didn't have to go over there. He didn't have to talk to the servants at all. He could have just thought it in his mind, and the wine bottles would have filled back up. It would have been done. Nobody would have been the wiser. But he didn't do that. Notice what he did do. Mary, Jesus' mother, says to the servants, "Do whatever my son tells you to do." Now this shows that Mary knew Jesus could do it. She just didn't know how he was going to do it. She had to have seen his miraculous powers before in private, maybe at home, to even know that he was capable of such a miracle. She just didn't know how he was going to do it. But look at what Jesus did. He told the servants to go fill up 6 stone ceremonial washing jars. Not drinking jars, that would have been a gallon or 2. These are ceremonial washing jars, up to 20 to 30 gallons each. That would have been 180 gallons. There's one there at the church, wedding church in Cana of Galilee, that commemorates this miracle, and it's taller than I am. It gives us an idea of how big this wedding really was. Now the servants do what Jesus says, but I'm sure that they're saying to themselves, "What's wrong with this guy? We got a problem here with wine, not water. We got plenty of water." And about that time, Jesus tells them to take a pitcher out of one of the 6 jars and take it to the host. And now they're saying to each other, the host isn't thirsty. He didn't ask for water. We're going to look stupid. But Mary's in charge, and she says, "Do what my son tells you to do." And so they take a pitcher of what they think is water. And remember, there's such a thing as white wine, so it might have even looked like water. And they take it over to the host. He takes a drink, and you can see his face light up, and he says, "Son of a gun, that's good wine. In fact, that's the best wine. And you're supposed to serve the best wine first, not last." And the servants are scratching their heads, looking at each other, dumbfounded. And you know what Jesus is doing during all of this? He's standing over in a corner, grinning from ear to ear. Jesus has a sense of humor. And I can see Jesus and the disciples leaving the wedding feast there at Cana, elbowing each other and saying, "Did you see the expression on the host when he tasted that and found that the water was now wine?" Jesus could have easily changed the water into wine or multiplied the wine that ran out without anybody knowing a thing. But his methodology was that of humor. And if you want to read an excellent book, read Elton Trueblood's book on the humor of Christ. Notice Jesus told the servants to fill the 6 jars to the brim. That was so that no one could add anything to them, so that there would be no doubt who was responsible for the miracle. All right, fourthly and finally, question number 4. What was the result of the miracle? And the answer, the disciples put their faith in Jesus. Verse 11. This, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed in Cana of Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. What happened in the middle of the laughter and the jokes and the fun and the party? Notice, people started following Jesus. What happened in the middle of the laughter and the jokes and the fun and the party? People followed him. They put their faith in him. That's what happened. He revealed his glory, and the credibility of the sign, the miracle, made the disciples realize this is a man I can follow for the rest of my life. Jesus is glorified at a party, not a prayer meeting or a church service, but the name of Christ is glorified when we laugh and when our joy bubbles up and overflows into the world. Let me tell you something, folks. A lack of joy will kill a church faster than a gossip. And that's a fact. And listen, if your doctrine makes you narrow and negative and legalistic and sour, then you need to get rid of your doctrine because it didn't come from Jesus. Rubens, the 17th century artist, said this: I can change with a single stroke of the brush a weeping child into a laughing child. And Jesus can do the same thing. Jesus does that. The brushstroke of forgiveness, the brushstroke of freedom, the brushstroke of love, acceptance, eternal life. One brushstroke can change tears into laughter. Let me finish with this. Our first ministry in East Tennessee was something else. There were a lot of changes that went on those 5 years that we were there. A lot of miracles happened in that church. There was an old preacher in the church. I don't think he ever thought he would preach again because he'd gone through a divorce, and he thought God could never use him again because he'd gone through a divorce. So whenever I would leave on vacation or have to be gone, I would let him fill in my pulpit. I didn't want him to think his ministry was over because of that. I encouraged him. To be honest, he wasn't a very good preacher at all. But when you're young and insecure, you put people like that in the pulpit while you're away. But I remember that church came alive during the 5 years that we were there. We had a great number of additions to the church, baptisms. We do like we do here. We would clap during the song service. We would cheer and clap whenever someone was baptized. And there would be laughter, the laughter of the redeemed. When I left, they asked him to step into the pulpit to fill in until they could find another minister. The first Sunday that he was there, he got up and he said, I want you to listen. Listen to that. Everybody looked around like, what are you talking about? He said, listen real hard. Listen to that. They all looked around like, what's with this guy? He said, do you hear that? It's called silence. And I love it. The laughter is gone. The clapping and the cheering are gone. And it's quiet in church the way that it should be. You see, he was so bottled up with sourness and misery that he couldn't stand the joy. Ladies and gentlemen, Jesus went around turning water into wine. But his cause is always hurt when his followers go behind him turning wine back into water. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that the first miracle was this miracle. I thank you that it had to do with joy and laughter and a party. And I thank you that Jesus was there. I thank you that he even used humor to address the problem at the wedding. He could have done it so many more ways, and he humorously had him fill up 6 huge jars so that everyone would know. I thank you for the quality of life that you give to us, the quality of your life that you've placed inside of us. And I thank you that that includes laughter and joy and cheering and clapping, because we're the only ones that have a reason to laugh. We praise you, Father. In Jesus' name, amen.